Hello there, and let's start with part 2 of your chapter, The Fight, from the book It So Happened, written by Ruskin Bond. We saw in the last part that Ranji had come to this village called Rajpur, where he is all alone without friends, and on a hot summer day he is roaming in a forest. And while roaming around, he discovers a small pool inside the forest. And when he compares that pool with his village pool, he finds it very clean and inviting and tempting. So without any delay, he quickly jumps into that pool and enjoys a good swim. And then he decides to come the next day. So when on the second day he arrives there at the pool, he saw a stranger standing there staring at him and not very happy about his presence. When Ranji invites that stranger boy to join him for a swim, the boy gets angrier. The boy calls himself a warrior and he tells Ranji that it was his private pool and nobody comes there. He swims there alone. But Ranji doesn't like this idea. Because the stranger was very offensive, Ranji couldn't be quiet. The stranger, who called himself a warrior, started with a fight with Ranji. Ranji was also not of the opinion that he should run away, and so he also gave a big blow to that stranger. Both of them had a violent fight. They hit each other, they threw each other on the ground, they tried to hurt each other's throat and head and legs, everything. They rolled on the ground, but both of them did not want to back out. But when they were exhausted, they decided to meet again the next day. Now part 2 starts with the next day's story, and today we are going to read and I'll explain you part 2 of this chapter, after which we will discuss the moral of this chapter and move on to the comprehension check and the other exercise question answers later. So let's start with this session today and know what will be the end of this story. Next day, the two claimants face each other across the pool. Claimants means candidates. They throw challenges and counter challenges at each other. The best solution, they realize, lies not in fighting each other, but fighting together for something. When Ranji got home, he found it difficult to explain the cuts and bruises. Bruises means black and blue mark that showed on his face, leg, and arms. It was difficult to conceal. Conceal means hide the fact that he had been in an unusually violent fight, and his mother insisted on his staying at home for the rest of the day. That evening, though, he slipped out of the house and went to the bazaar, where he found comfort and solace. Solace means relief in a bottle of vividly colored lemonade and a banana leaf full of hot, sweet jalebis. He had just finished the lemonade when he saw his adversary. Adversary means enemy, coming down the road. His first impulse is a sudden desire, was to turn away and look elsewhere. His second, to throw the lemonade bottle at his enemy. When Ranji reached home, he found it extremely difficult to hide his bruises and injuries from his mother. His mother commanded him to stay indoors for the remaining part of the day. Despite the instructions, he went out of the house into the bazaar in the evening, where he found comfort or relief in drinking a bottle of lemonade and some hot and sweet jalebis that was served on a banana leaf. As he finished drinking his lemonade, he caught sight of his enemy coming down the road. His immediate thought was to turn towards the other side and look somewhere else. And his second thought was to throw that lemonade bottle at his enemy. But he did neither of these things. Instead, he stood his ground and scowled at his passing adversary. Scowled means looked angrily. He stood his ground is an idiom which means he maintained his position when expecting an attack from the enemy. And the warrior said nothing either. but scowled back with equal ferocity. Ferocity means fierceness or suggesting anger. The next day was as hot as the previous one. Ranji felt weak and lazy and not at all eager for a fight. His body was stiff and sore. Sore means paining after the previous day's encounter. But he could not refuse the challenge. Not to turn up at the pool would be an acknowledgement of defeat. Acknowledgement means acceptance. When Ranji saw his enemy in the bazaar, he had two things in his mind. First was either he should turn away or he should break the bottle of lemonade on his head. But he resisted. He did not act upon any of the two desires. He just stood there firmly and stared angrily at his enemy. The warrior, too, on the other hand, passed by the fighter while giving him angry look. The next day was as hot as the previous day. Ranji did not have the power and will to fight because he felt tired. His body was aching and he felt rigid or stiff because of the previous day's fight. Despite feeling this way, he could not afford to back off from the challenge. And if he did that, if he did not go near the pool that day, it would mean that he had accepted his loss. From the way he felt, just then he knew he would be beaten in another fight. But he could not acquiesce. Acquiesce means accept quietly in his own defeat. He must defy his enemy. Defy means oppose to the last or outwit him. Outwit means make a fool of him, for only then could he gain his respect. If he surrendered now, he would be beaten for all time. But to fight and be beaten today left him free to fight and be beaten again. As long as he fought, he had a right to the pool in the forest. Ranji knew and he was well aware that if he fought in this condition, he would anyway end up losing in a violent fight. But he could not sit quietly and see himself lose. In order to gain respect, he needed to win against his opponent, or at least outsmart him. Because if he gave up, it would mean that he has accepted his defeat for a lifetime. But if he showed up and even got beaten up by the other boy, it would set him free and he could fight again, even if it meant being beaten up once more. But he knew that as long as he showed up for the fight, he reserved himself a right to the pool. He was half hoping that the warrior would have forgotten the challenge, but these hopes were dashed. Dashed means crushed when he saw his opponent sitting, stripped to the waist, on a rock on the other side of the pool. The warrior was rubbing oil on his body. He saw Ranji beneath the sal trees and called a challenge across the waters of the pool. "Come over on the side and fight," he shouted. But Ranji was not going to submit to any conditions laid down by his opponent. "Come this side and fight," he shouted back with equal vigor. Vigor means strength. "Swim across and fight me here," called the other. "Or perhaps you cannot swim the length of the pool." But Ranji could have swum the length of the pool a dozen times without tiring, and here he would show the warrior his superiority. So slipping out of his vest, he dived straight into the water. Dived means jumped, cutting through it like a knife and surfaced with hardly a splash. The warrior's mouth hung open in amazement. Amazement means surprise. Ranji was hoping that the warrior would have forgotten the challenge, but when he went to the pool, his all hopes were crushed. They were shattered because he saw his opponent sitting on a rock on the other side of the pool and he was rubbing oil on his body, all set for another fight. When the opponent or when the warrior saw Ranji came there, he threw a challenge and he told him to come to his side of the pool. But Ranji did not want to accept any conditions laid by the warrior, and so he told the warrior to come to his side of the pool and fight. But then the warrior challenged him and asked him whether he could swim the entire length of the pool or was he scared of swimming across. But Ranji could have swum that length of the pool a dozen times without even getting tired. And this was the chance when he could show his superiority to his enemy. So quickly, without wasting any time, Ranji jumped into the pool and he swam through it. And the warrior looked at him in utter surprise. "You can dive," he exclaimed. "It is easy," said Ranji, "treading water. Treading water means keeping oneself upright in deep water by moving feet, waiting for a further challenge. Can't you dive?" "No," said the other. "I jump straight in, but if you will tell me how, I will make a dive." "It is easy," said Ranji. "Stand on the rock, stretch your arms out, and allow your head to displace your feet. Displace means move." The warrior stood up, stiff and straight, stretched out his arms, and threw himself into the water. He landed flat on his belly with a crash that sent the birds screaming out of the trees. Ranji dissolved into laughter. Dissolved into laughter means started to laugh. The warrior was so impressed with the skills of diving of Ranji that he asked him how he did that, and Ranji to that replied that it was easy, that he just had to stand on the rock, stretch his arms out, and allow his head to move his feet. The warrior also tried to do the same. He also stood up, stiff and straight. He stretched out his arms and threw himself in the water. But when he landed in the water, he did that on his belly, which gave out a crashing noise of the water, and it scared the birds who were sitting on the trees. Seeing the warrior's action, Ranji started to laugh. "Are you trying to empty the pool?" he asked as the warrior came to the surface, spouting water like a small whale. Spouting means spraying water. Here, the warrior is compared with a small whale who sprays water from its body. "Wasn't it good?" asked the boy, evidently proud of his feat. Feat here means a clever act or a special skill. "Not very good," said Ranji. "You should have more practice. See, I'll do it again." And pulling himself up on a rock, he executed another perfect dive. Executed means showed him in action. The other boy waited for him to come up, but swimming underwater, Ranji circled him and came upon him from behind. "How did you do that?" asked the astonished youth. Astonished means surprised. "Can't you swim underwater?" asked Ranji. "No, but I will try." Now, at this point of time, Ranji and the stranger have got into a very friendly kind of conversation. Now, Ranji laughed at how the stranger had dived in, and it seemed as if he was trying to empty the pool. Ranji tried to mock the stranger. The stranger asked him what was wrong, and Ranji told him that he would show it once again. And again, Ranji dived into the water and showed him how to do it. And while he was under the water, Ranji circled the stranger and came up from behind. When the stranger saw Ranji's underwater swimming skills, he was surprised again. The warrior made a tremendous effort. Tremendous means very great effort to plunge to the bottom. Plunge means jump of the pool, and indeed he thought he had gone right down, though his bottom, like a duck's, remained above surface. Ranji, however, did not discourage him. "It was not bad," he said, "but you need a lot of practice." "Will you teach me?" asked his enemy. "If you like, I will teach you." You must teach me. If you do not teach me, I'll beat you. Will you come here every day and teach me? If you like, said Ranji. They had pulled themselves out of the water and were sitting side by side on a smooth grey rock. The stranger also wanted to swim underwater just like Ranji, and so he gave it a try. And he gathered all his strength and went to the bottom of the pool. The stranger thought that he had made straight away to the bottom, but his bottom or his back part had remained above the surface like a duck. Now Ranji did not want to discourage him, so he told him that it was not bad and he needed a lot of practice. The warrior told Ranji that he should teach him the skills of swimming, otherwise, he will beat him up. Ranji decided to teach him, and they both came out of the water and sat side by side on a smooth rock. My name is Suraj, said the warrior. What is yours? It is Ranji. I am strong, am I not? Asked Suraj, bending his arm so that a ball of muscle stood up, stretching the white of a flesh. You are strong, said Ranji. You are a real Pahalwan. One day I'll be the world's champion wrestler, said Suraj, slapping his thighs, which shook with the impact of his hand. He looked critically at Ranji's hard, thin body. You are quite strong yourself. He conceded. Conceded means admitted or said. But you are too bony. Bony means very thin. I know you people do not eat enough. You must come and have your food with me. I drink one seer of milk every day. Seer is the same as seer, a unit of weight which is used previously in India. And one seer is a little less than a liter. We have got our own cow. The warrior now introduced himself as Suraj, and Ranji also told his name. Suraj showed how strong he was by bending his arm so that his muscles stood up, stretching out of his white flesh. Ranji told him that he was strong indeed, and he told Suraj that he was a real Pahalwan. Pahalwan is a Hindi word which in English means wrestler. While slapping his thighs, which shook with its impact, Suraj told him that he will become world's number one wrestler someday. When Suraj looked at Ranji's body, he said that he was also quite strong, but he was very thin and bony because he did not eat enough. So Suraj invited Ranji to his home to have food with him. And Suraj told that every day he drinks one seer of milk. One seer is a little less than a liter, and they have got their own cows. Be my friend, and I will make you a Pahalwan like me. I know if you teach me to dive and swim underwater, I'll make you a Pahalwan. That is fair, isn't it? That is fair, said Ranji, though he doubted if he was getting the better of exchange. Suraj offered to help Ranji become a Pahalwan if Ranji agreed to become his friend. Suraj told Ranji that if he would teach him how to dive and swim underwater, then in turn he would help Ranji become as strong as a wrestler. He asked Ranji if it was fair. Ranji agreed that it was fair, although he doubted if he was getting more benefit out of it. Suraj put his arm around the younger boy and said, We are friends now, yes? They looked at each other with honest, unflinching eyes. Unflinching means without blinking, looking straight at each other. And in that moment, love and understanding were born. We are friends, said Ranji. The birds had settled again in their branches and the pool was quiet and limpid. Limpid means clear, in the shade of the sal trees. It is our pool, said Suraj. Nobody else can come here without our permission. Who would dare? Who would dare? Said Ranji, smiling with the knowledge that he had won the day. So at the end of their conversation, Suraj put his arm around Ranji and asked him if they were friends now. They looked into each other's eyes with complete honesty without blinking. At that particular moment, there was love and understanding which emerged between both the boys. Ranji replied that they were friends, and by that time, the birds which were scared away, they had come back to the branches. The pool was still and it was clear under the shade of the sal trees. Suraj exclaimed that now onwards it was their pool and no one else could use it without their permission. He said, "Who would dare?" Ranji repeated him in agreement, "Who would dare?" And Ranji smiled with the thought that he won the fight that day. Okay, so now it's time for me to summarize what we read in part 2. After that fight, when Ranji came home, it was very difficult for him to hide those bruises and cuts and injury marks from his mother. But he did not speak much. Though his body was aching, he was in a very poor shape. He still decided to go in the evening to the market, where he had lemonade and some jalebis. When Ranji saw his adversary roaming in the market too, Ranji's first impulse was that he should turn away and go away from there. But then he thought of breaking that lemonade bottle on his enemy's head. But actually, he did none of the two. He just kept staring at him with that wild gaze in his eyes. And then came the next day. Ranji's body was still paining. It still had those injury marks. But by not going there, it would be like accepting his defeat. So he decided to show up on the pool. And when he went there, he just half hoped that what if the stranger or his enemy had forgotten about the fight? How nice it would be. But nothing of that sort happened. When he went there, he saw the stranger on the other side of the pool oiling his body. When the stranger saw Ranji on the other side of the pool, the warrior or the stranger threw a challenge to Ranji and asked if he couldn't swim at all or what. Ranji got very frustrated and he dived into the pool. The way Ranji dived into the pool and swam across the pool, the stranger was really impressed. This started with a very friendly conversation. Ranji at first told him how to dive, what position of the body to take and dive into the pool. The other boy tried it, but it didn't come out well. And then the series of conversation started to happen. The stranger boy told Ranji that his name was Suraj. And now there was no fight between the two. They were talking like friends. Ranji promised Suraj to teach him to dive and swim. On the other hand, Suraj invited Ranji to his home for eating food and also promised that he will teach him wrestling. So this was the end of their enmity, the fight, and the beginning of a beautiful friendship which lasted for long. And at the end, both of them decided that that particular pool would be theirs and no one else. So this is the beautiful ending of the story which we read today. So now let's talk about the moral given by this story. We do come across a variety of people. Some are good to us, some are bad to us, some are jealous of us, some inspire us, some motivate us, some help us, and others will look for chances to pull you down. But at that point of time, one should be strong. You should not shy away or you should not run away from the challenges that you are facing. You have to face them strongly, just as Ranji did in this story. But at the same time, any kind of negative feeling, any kind of enmity should not take place in your heart. You have to get rid of that enmity because otherwise the world will not run. So just as the end of the story tells us that any kind of enmity or any kind of negative feelings should be replaced by everlasting friendship and positive feelings. With this beautiful moral, I end today's session. But before going, I will flash the answers of comprehension check and textbook question answers in front of you. Please note them down or read them through. That's all in today's session and wait for my next one where I'll take a new topic for you. Till then, think about changing your enemies into your friends. Thank you very much. God bless you.